Hello, welcome back to Math Time with Professor Prime, and I'm your host as always, Professor Prime. And today we're going to talk about math and Sonic the Hedgehog, the game that got me into gaming. And this is how I see this video going. I'm going to talk about how math is used in the gameplay for Sonic the Hedgehog, and I'm also going to talk about how math is used in the more meta sense regarding Sonic. And I'm going to talk about the implications of that gameplay for the franchise as a whole and what the success of Sonic meant for Sega, for Sonic itself, for the video game industry, and for me. With that in mind, I am going to be talking about other games and other elements of the Sonic franchise, but I won't be going too in depth with them because Sonic is a rabbit hole that you cannot go too far down, because then you would just never stop. Seriously, it's crazy. But yeah, so that's how I see things going, and I'm going to talk about my history with the Sonic franchise, and it should be fun. With that in mind, spoilers for the first game. The story is barely there, so we're just gonna roll in and to handle that. But when I talk about other elements, I'm probably not gonna really get too heavy in spoilers. And honestly, with Sonic as a franchise, those games aren't really known to have a lot of spoilers, or like at least not ones that are really worth anything. But if you're really cautious, I would hold off on this video. But it's Sonic, so you should be good. But I'll leave it at your discretion. So let's get into it. Again, spoilers ahead. All right, so to start, Sonic was my first game. I got the Sega Genesis one year for Christmas, and it was bundled with Sonic, which was a good move on Sega's part. And so yeah, I've been playing video games since I was 6, and I'll be 34 this year. So I've been playing for almost 30 years. Video games are a big part of my life, and I grew up in the 90s, so it was, I think, very interesting because Nintendo and Sega were definitely beefing back in the day, which is kind of funny because they were making money either way. But yeah, so with Sonic though, Sonic was developed to combat Nintendo. They needed a mascot for their company so they could compete with Nintendo and Mario, and things got interesting from there. So Sonic came out, and when it did, it was pretty simple in terms of how you play it. And for the record, that simplicity in how you play it, that's not indicative of the complexities of what it takes to develop a game. But if we want to jump into the gameplay and then talk about the rest of the stuff later, here's how it goes. The general idea is so you have, each level of the game that you're going through, and the idea is to get to the end of the level without dying, or at least without dying too much. And the gameplay is centered around going really, really fast, right? And I'm sure a lot of y'all know that going in, because just about everyone has played a Sonic game at this point, but or at least they know about what goes into the basics. But still, it's worth talking about because there's a lot of math in that. Just right off the bat, the whole point is to go fast, right? And there's a lot of math as far as speed is concerned, right? That's the whole thing with it. But we can get into that a bit more. So the idea is to go really, really fast, and so with that in mind, there are hazards throughout the environment. There's spikes, there's different elements of the level that might cause you to trip up. There's different slopes, there's loops, there's springs, there's like I said, the spikes, but there's also the robots with animals trapped inside of them because reasons. And the idea is you want to go fast, you want to get to the end of each level, but you also want to avoid hazards or get around them, or if you are hit by them, still being able to go on. And the idea is what they do for health is it's a ring system. If you have rings, you're able to bounce back from issues like spikes or getting hit by a robot. But if you fall to the bottom of the screen and there's nothing left for you to latch onto, so to speak, you're screwed. And the idea is like when you're collecting the rings, if you collect 100, you can get an extra life. You start out with 3. And so throughout the course of Sonic the Hedgehog, there are 6 different acts. I mean, sorry, 6 different zones with 3 acts to each zone. And then at the end of all that, a final zone. And so the way it typically works is like, you're going through your first 2 acts and you're doing your thing, and then like at the end of the 3rd act you fight Dr. Robotnik, or Dr. Eggman if you prefer. I grew up hearing Dr. Robotnik. Both are accurate. He's Dr. Ivo Robotnik, aka Dr. Eggman. Or I guess some people might just say Eggman. Either way. So, like, as you may have noticed, right, there's a lot of math just in how the game functions on that surface level, right? Because you have math as far as as far as the speed is going, because, you have to pick up speed, and there's a lot of physics in that. And there's a lot of math in that physics, and you have to be monitoring yourself, and you have to navigate through each act and different hazards within that act. And like, you have you have different loops, you have slopes, and you have springs that propel you forward. And there's math in all this, right? There's math in the physics, and there's a lot of geometry going on, and that's all really cool. And if you're looking at the environments, right, there's a lot of math that goes into developing that, because again, there's geometry aspects of that, but just the programming and like the animation, there's a lot of math in all of that. So the game on that base level is very math heavy, and like you might not be writing things down with a pen and a paper, but you're doing a lot of math as you're going along, and that's pretty cool. And I guess like the other big thing with this game is like you're trying to stop Dr. Robotnik from collecting the Chaos Emeralds. At this point, there's 6. In later games, there's 7. And I don't know why that change was made. But yeah, so that's the whole thing, and that's pretty much the gameplay in a nutshell. The story was literally what I just said. You're trying to stop Dr. Robotnik from collecting the Chaos Emeralds and destroying the world, and gaining a lot of power and whatnot. So yeah, and that's pretty much it for that. And then, like I said, there's so much math that goes into making it, right? Because just from putting the pieces together, it's like there's a lot of math that goes into the programming, like I said, and the animation and the geometry and physics of it all. And then you got to figure, right? Like they wanted this game to be a success. They wanted to compete with Mario, and there was a lot of mascots that they were thinking about and trying, and things just didn't stick. So you got to imagine a lot of math went into actually deciding that Sonic was going to be it. And bundling Sonic the Hedgehog with the Sega Genesis was a good move, because when it worked, right, Sonic worked, and it's like, hey, if it's bundled or with a Genesis, like you buy a Genesis, you get Sonic, and they made a lot of money off of that. And so here's the thing, right? Like there's a lot of math in the money. There's a lot of math in the money that it takes to like make a game, but then in the amount of money that comes out of that game, right? And so with Sonic the Hedgehog, right, it made a lot of money. It helped the Genesis to overtake Nintendo for a while, which was something that hadn't happened in a bit at the time, right? Like, because Nintendo had been riding strong since the mid 80s, and so Sega overtook them for a little bit. That didn't last, but they were doing well for a while. And so it's just like, it's interesting to think about it all, because if Sonic wasn't a success, I don't think, Sega would have stopped making games or anything like that, but I don't think they would have been as popular. There were so many video game consoles that came out at that time or around that time that just didn't land. And so having a mascot was something that was very useful, and it also contributed to that ongoing war that like Nintendo and Sega had for a while. And it's just like, it's interesting to think about, because that game was so popular, sequels came, and at the time, man, did they get them sequels out quick. They got them out real quick. It was insane. And so Sonic the Hedgehog 2 took what worked about Sonic and, just kind of amped it up, refined it. It introduced Tails to the series. It introduced Super Sonic to the series, which, like, you collect the several Chaos Emeralds, gain 50 rings, you could become Supersonic. And that's how that's generally functioned throughout the series. And math right there. And then Sonic 3 came along, and Sonic 3 was followed by Sonic and Knuckles. And I mentioned that because it was the kind of thing where they were pretty much meant to be one giant game, to the point where later on you could get like a connector of sorts so you can play them together. And so you'd have Sonic 3 and Knuckles. So it's like you're talking about two separate games. But at the same time, you're talking about two pieces of a whole, you know? And there's math in that. But yeah, and I'd say to this day though, like Sonic 3 and Knuckles, or it's still like my favorite. 'Cause, you know, like Sonic 3 introduced Knuckles. Sonic and Knuckles allowed you to play as Knuckles, and together it, I think, really works well. And it's one of the few cases that I've seen in the Sonic franchise where not only could you become Supersonic, but you could become Hypersonic. That was a thing that happened. Because like, right, like you could get the Chaos Emeralds in Sonic 3, and then I think like the levels, and it's been a while, so I think like the levels were later replaced, and so you can get like the Super Chaos Emeralds in Sonic 3 and Knuckles. It was something like that. But the whole point was like you could not only get Supersonic but later Hypersonic, and that was just like that was wild. But yeah, so Sonic worked really well, and it led to Sonic 2, and it led to Sonic 3 and Sonic and Knuckles, or if you prefer Sonic 3 and Knuckles, and these were all like back to back, like year after year. So it got wild, and later there was Sonic CD, which probably doesn't get enough credit. That was the game where, you know, they had a lot of time travel. That was a thing. And you know there's a lot of math in that. With that in mind, if you look at Sonic as a whole though, right, like it did really well during the Genesis days. It didn't do so well during the Sega Saturn days. But then when the Dreamcast came about, you had Sonic Adventure. And at this point, they felt a bit more comfortable with doing 3D. So you took the things that you did in 2D and you kind of put them in that 3D setting. But I don't think, and this is for me personally, that they ever really stuck the landing on the 3D games. There are 3D Sonic games that I enjoy, but I don't think they really ever captured that proper spirit as that like 2D side scroller. You know, like I just, there were certain levels in the 3D era, like where you could feel like you're going really fast, but a lot of them it just doesn't work, or like they're playing some weird gimmick. Like there was Sonic Heroes, and that was a weird game. Um, but anyway, so I talked a lot about Sonic in this video so far, and I'm going to continue to do so. I think I wanted to pivot real quick because Sonic the Hedgehog, right? That game set up a franchise. It set up a series of games that are still being made to this day. But not only did they set that up, so much came out of it, right? Because they had like cartoons. I remember there was two, like particularly in the '90s. One was kind of wacky, one was more serious. But those were not the last of the cartoons. And you know they have an ongoing comic series. There's been anime, there's been manga, there's been a movie finally. That actually did pretty well, and that's something, you know, to be said, because like video game movies aren't really known for quality, and not only was that a successful movie, like Sonic the Hedgehog, like not only was that a successful movie, but it was one that was like pretty well received, and I think all that is interesting because throughout Sonic's journey, it's like you had that first one that set everything up. But then it just seemed like the franchise was trying to kill itself sometimes. They took chances, which is admirable in some regard, but they made a lot of mistakes along the way. Sonic, the 2006 version of Sonic being one of them, which I think many would argue isn't a complete game. And there seemed to be like a lot of that in the 3D era where it felt like the games weren't complete. They were like buggy, glitchy messes. And for the record, it does take a lot of work to make these games, right? It takes a lot of math. It takes a lot of people. It takes a lot of logistics. and there's something to be said for that. But at the same time, right? They have resources, they have money, they could take their time with these releases. But also, without letting mind, um, they seem to have been turning around for these last few years, right? Like you had things like Sonic Mania, which went down really well. Um, with a lot of the fan base, and I think that was really cool because the Sonic team, and all of them, they actually hired someone who made fan games to make it, and I thought that was a genius move. And some other long-going franchises should probably take note. Just saying, because you get some very very creative people out there that are fans of this franchise and that franchise, and they're doing some really cool stuff. So it's nice to see someone get a win like that. Similarly, uh, that sort of thing happened with Dragon Ball. We had a fan of the series who made like fan manga, and now they're doing the Dragon Ball Super manga and have been for years. But I digress. Um, so where was I going with this? I wanted to just like bring up some of the later stuff because Sonic, it went really well for Sega, and it was a franchise that they could continue to come back to even when they got out of the software game. It was a franchise that Sega could go back to even when they got out of the hardware game. Because Sega hasn't made hardware in a long, long time, and they still been making games though. And every now and then they come out with a Sonic game, or like a Sonic game gets licensed to another studio to make. Either way, it's interesting to see, and it's been kind of rocky. But Sonic never stopped making money. There's a lot of crappy games and a lot of tough times, but Sonic never stopped making money, and that's insane to think about. And there's been a lot of other genres, right? So Sonic is a 2D side-scrolling platformer, but there's been racing games which seem appropriate on one hand, which I don't think works in actuality though, which is odd to say. But there's also been fighting games. Um, there's been other genres too, but it's just crazy to think about. Um, I don't want this video to get too long, so I'll sum it up by saying this: Sonic was my first game. It got me into gaming. The Genesis was my first system, and I did move on to other systems later on, of course. I was never a one system kind of guy, but it started with Genesis, it started with Sonic, and video games are such a big part of my life. And while I do think, some game would have came along that I would have played and got me into it, Sonic was the first. It was easy to play, you didn't really have to think about it too much, and my 6 year old self, he enjoyed it. And I enjoy playing Sonic now, like here and there. Yes, after all this time, I do still play some Sonic games, but I definitely do my research before getting the game, for sure. Because, it is an investment that we're making when we buy a game. And, there's math in that, right? We're making a money investment, but we're also making a time investment. And we want to get as much bang for our bucks as we can. And so when it's concerning Sonic, I do my digging, I do my homework, because I don't want to waste my money. And I think that's worth considering, because it's like I want to get a decent amount of time out of the game, and I want to make sure I didn't waste my money. And for the record, I don't spend that much money on Sonic games when I do buy them, because even if I see something that's really well reviewed, I'm a little skeptical. But it will always, always, always be that first game. There's like I said, there's other games that could have came along, but that was the first. And it's just interesting to see how it evolves over time, and it's interesting to see the math and all of it. So that being said, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you haven't played Sonic, you should try. It can be fun. And if you didn't feel like necessarily paying for a game, I know there's some free to play options, but who knows what comes with those? Because free to play, it could go either way. But you could do your digging. But there are options. You could play the actual first Sonic Hedgehog in a variety of ways. You could do so for free. There are options out there. And if you do, I hope you have fun because at the end of the day, I do think Sonic at its core is fun. And I think when games in that franchise remember what the core, gameplay should be about, they tend to do a lot better, you know? So yeah, Math and Sonic. They go well together, and Sonic was the first game I've ever played. And I've been gaming ever since. Almost nonstop. I'll see you in the next one. Professor Prime out.